I've shown you a lot of ways to make buckets public. Let's go figure out how to find them. Spend as much time with a crusty old security graybeard and he or she, and okay, most of the she's don't have the beard part, but they're still kind of the same. They're going to regale you with phrases like defense in depth and DMZ and egress perimeter consolidation. So, if you didn't know, most of the information security profession started with network security. And for many practitioners, that's really still their primary focus, and there's nothing wrong with that. Network security is difficult and complex, especially at scale, and it's only getting harder as we move more into cloud and containers. But if you really think about it, our focus on network security isn't about the network itself. It's about protecting the systems and data on those networks. Put it this way, we don't call the profession information security and information technology for nothing. Network security is a cornerstone, but we have more than one corner. And don't make me count the corners, please. I'm really bad at math. As we move to cloud, we are learning that public cloud creates some new intertwined perimeters. Why? Because the entire management plane and all of our stuff is hosted on the internet and not behind a set of firewalls in a data center that we can technically disconnect from the world by yanking a few cables. In previous labs, I've talked about the IAM perimeter, which is a great way to describe the problems of preventing attackers from accessing our management plane credentials, including our system credentials, to break into our deployments. Now, there's a related concept that I've hinted at called the data perimeter, which defines how our data can be accessed in the cloud. And it includes mostly IAM and network permissions. I first heard about the data perimeter concept from a friend of mine. I'll just call him H, and he's another longtime hardcore cloud security pro who has had to work in some thorny environments with really big stakes. And since those early days of our discussions, it's become a concept that AWS has started talking about, defining, and educating on more broadly. I like their definition. It's really succinct, and I think it nails the concept. And I quote, a data perimeter is a set of permissions guardrails in your AWS environment you use to help ensure that only your trusted identities are accessing trusted resources from expected networks. Data perimeter guardrails are meant to serve as always-on boundaries to help protect your data across a broad set of AWS accounts and resources. So think of it this way. The data perimeter is a set of interlocking security controls to define who, where, and how your cloud data can be accessed. And this includes API calls and network access and other potential kind of sharing, like those archaic S3 ACLs we used a few weeks ago in our first S3 lab. Now, we've already completed quite a few labs laying down the foundation to enforce a data perimeter. The core of it can be made up of service control policies, VPC endpoint policies, and resource control policies. And now we didn't do VPC endpoint policies, we did cover VPC endpoints, and that's the starting place. Now, why am I using just those higher level, those like organization-wide policy constructs? Well, and not resource-based policies or IAM policies. And this is a big thing about the data perimeter. It should apply to your entire organization. Those policies are down at the individual resource and the individual user level. What we're talking about with the data perimeter is that it's the shields around the enterprise, not those like personal shields that you see in that movie Dune. While you've learned the concepts, we've barely touched on how to actually build a data perimeter, and I'm not going to be doing that today. Instead, we're going to start on the detection side. This is going to give us that visualization about what's going on in our environment so we can make our decisions. And when I go into a new organization that needs Amazon security help, this is always where I start. I don't throw the shields up because if I start with prevention, I'm going to break things, like probably really badly. One of my goals in these labs is to teach you how to build a data perimeter. And while it'll be easier to create in our nice, fresh CloudSol organizations, and we could do a data perimeter right now, no problem, the implementation in existing environments is harder. And that's one reason why we're going to focus on detection today. And then incoming labs, I'm going to get deeper into prevention. And we've already laid all the groundwork for this. AWS provides a good tool to help us figure out those data exposures. And we're going to use this detection to help drive our remediation and our prevention strategy. We have to know what those exposures are and where they are, and honestly, if they should be there or not, before we can go ahead and start putting those guardrails, putting that data perimeter in place. The tool is called IAM Access Analyzer, and it has a handful of features for evaluating IAM policies and access, including resource-based policies. It includes external access analyzers looking for access from the outside world, as well as tools for analyzing your IAM policies at different levels, looking for things like unused privileges. We're going to use the external access analyzers today. These are free, and it's a powerful tool to help detect your public exposures, but also when you're sharing to other AWS accounts. You'll see how this works. But Access Analyzer doesn't cover necessarily every possible resource, but the coverage is really solid and includes the major ones: S3, IAM roles, Lambda functions, KMS encryption keys, and most of the database platforms. All the features are interesting, but the external analyzers is the most important, and well, that's where we're going to start. So here's a few important points about these access analyzers. First is they support delegate administration. We're going to set it up so that you're going to be able to manage Access Analyzer from your security audit account. Remember, we want to stay out of the management account as much as possible. The next is, and this is what I meant about cross-account versus public access, Access Analyzer works with a concept known as zones of trust. And so it can detect sharing outside of the zone of trust, and that's what you get to define. Now, for our case, we're going to define it as our organization, but in real life, you could narrow things down to individual accounts. One cool thing, and again, part of our groundwork, is Security Hub is going to pick up any Access Analyzer alerts, and we already have that configured to send us emails. So kind of cool how it all wires in together, and just turning this on and setting those analyzers, we don't have to do anything else to get emails when something's going to go ahead and create a new exposure. Now, in terms of timing, Access Analyzer, it tries to detect any of this external sharing outside your zone of trust within about 30 minutes of the change that caused it. But that relies on CloudTrail and some other things. It may not always be 100% reliable because there's a lot of complexities in how these policies interact and such, and how things can be shared. To help manage that, it also runs a daily sweep. So at least every 24 hours, it's going to run through. But keep in mind, that means you're not going to be able to use Access Analyzer as a real-time exposure tool. It's not going to tell you instantly when somebody makes an S3 bucket public or shares it with a hostile account. You'll get that notice at least within a day. And some of the other deeper detection and response stuff we're going to get into later, I'm going to show you how to detect that stuff closer to real time. All right, enough talk. Let's go ahead and get into it. So the flow is pretty straightforward. We're going to go into our management account and we're going to enable delegated administration. Then we're going to go into our security audit account. So that's the account where we want to be running all of our security testing tools like Security Hub and stuff. And Access Analyzer falls into that category. From that security audit account, once we've got that delegated administration, we're going to set up our analyzer, and we're going to set it up for the entire organization. And it'll make sense what that looks like as we go ahead and get into it. And well, there's some intricate a few little details about it. You know what? I'm going to cover those as we actually are hands-on. Let's go to our sign-in portal. From our sign-in portal, as I mentioned, we're going to start with our management account and administrator access. Remember, our goal is to eventually use this as little as possible as we're setting up all this delegated administration. Then within there, we can go to IAM, or I like to just skip forward and type in Access Analyzer, and that'll drop me right into the right part of Access Analyzer in the portal. Now, don't make the mistake I did the first time I set up this lab. I went straight to Create Analyzer. That would create it here. Instead, I want you to jump to Analyzer Settings. We're diving in, and we're going to add Delegated Administrator. Now, I need the account ID. Well, what's great is our sign-in portal has it right here. I go back to the sign-in portal, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy out the account ID of my security audit account. Don't need a login or anything. I just need that account ID. All right. Go over here, add delegated administration, and type in that account ID and save changes. Now that's pretty instant. So it's just set that up, the delegated administration, the IAM on the back end. And that is all that we need to do from our management account. We've now delegated control. We're not going to create analyzers or anything up here. We're going to manage the rest of it down in that security audit account. Let's close this window out. And then from our portal, let's go into administrator access. Security full admin would, I think, work as well, but we'll just be safe and go to administrator access into our security audit account. From here, now we'll go back to Access Analyzer. Access Analyzer. Analyzer. Helps to spell things correctly. And that took way too long. And you'll notice that if I go through here and go to Analyzer Settings, I can see that my current account is the Delegate Administrator. Awesome. So we'll start on the portal here, and we'll just go to Create Analyzer. The one we want is External Access Analysis. Now, remember, this is a region-based service. We only have 2 regions available. Everything else should be locked out in my organization. But we're going to create this in the US West Oregon region, and then we're going to cycle through, and we're going to create one in US East as well. And we want to set up our scope. You can leave the name here. That's totally fine. And the scope for our entire organization. The rest of this, just go with the defaults and hit Create Analyzer. Now, once I hit Create Analyzer, it takes a little bit, and we're not going to necessarily get our results right away. There's a good chance this is going to be a lab that I start now and I let things run in the background for a little bit, but we may not get our results until tomorrow, and that's one of the reasons I'm setting up my recording in time so I can do that. But again, it's not run a scan yet, and we have our findings, no findings yet. Now, clicking Manage, it's still in that creating, and I can do rules and everything else, so it's not like I'm going to go ahead and trigger a scan. What do I want you to do now? Let's switch over. We're in Oregon. And remember, we have 2 regions that we are operating out of. Let's go to Virginia and repeat the exact same steps. So that analyzer is not found. Just go to the top level, Access Analyzer, create an analyzer, external, default of your current organization, click Create Analyzer. Once that creation process starts, if I go to Manage Analyzer, it's actually still in that creation status. What I want to do now is go back to US West Oregon, because we don't want to be in US East anymore now that we have our analyzer set up there. And then we'll go back to that External Access Analyzer. And again, it has not done the scan, so it's going to be a bit before I get my results. I'm going to go back into Access Analyzer here, and Analyzer Settings, and click on my analyzer, and it's still in that creation status. So it takes a little while for all of this to get up and running. Once we have that set up, it can take a little while for findings because Access Analyzer has to go ahead and do a scan. And we're managing everything up at the top level within our organization and our security audit account, which is going to let us as security administrators figure out where all of our exposures are. You do need to set this up a little bit differently if you want to allow people in their own accounts to actually see those results. Think about it. Right now, our workload account, which is where we have our shared S3 buckets, nobody down at that account level has permissions to see Access Analyzer in our security audit account. Now, all that said, I thought this was going to take like hours. I got results in about 5-ish minutes right now. So the way to go ahead and see those results on yours is from this, anywhere in the Access Analyzer console, go to hit External Access. And with External Access here, you can see these are all of the active findings. And we have a small environment, which is why we're able to get our results pretty quickly within here. And notice we have a finding ID and the resource, and then the external access. Right up at the top, we've got 2 big findings here. We have detected the 2 S3 buckets that we exposed, one by our bucket ACL and the other by our bucket policy. And I'll come back to what these are all in a minute and describe what those are there for. So this is awesome. In a few minutes, I was able to find my public buckets hiding in an account deeper within my organization. And I can click on these. I can actually look at more details on the findings, pops it up into a new window. It goes ahead and you can do this yourself. You can see that it tells you exactly how that finding was there. And you can go ahead and archive it, create an exception for it, or you can go down and fix that problem. This is a really great way to get a good handle on your organization. Nothing we did required me to go down into each individual account. Nothing we did required me to make any changes in any of those environments. I just set up Delegate Administration, turned on Access Analyzer, and I'm finding all the public stuff that's being shared. And if you go back into your console and we'll go back over to that tab, you can see that we do have a bunch of these other findings here for various IAM roles and such. And so if I click on one of these, we'll go through, and that's because these are set up from our this is what's set up for our SAML provider through our delegated administration. So these are ones that we would actually go ahead and approve. So it's detecting cross-account IAM access as well. I love this. It's really great to help us get started on our data perimeter. This is not the shields. This is the sensors. But I always like to know what's going on before I go in and try and make any changes and actually break things. Another quick one, but really impactful. And by now, or pretty soon, you're going to start getting some alerts. I bet you got a bunch of guard duty alerts and some other security hub alerts for all of these things detected. In fact, let me go take a quick look. I'm going to pause the video, see what my email has. Those results came in a lot faster than I expected. What you can see here is this is the raw JSON that was in the email. Really hard to read through that. Just my eyeballs don't work. I put that into a tool that parses it and makes it a little bit more readable here. And if I scroll down, you can see right here. So it tells me my S3 bucket. I got this in email. It says it allows public access, and it's labeled as a medium severity. I'd actually rate that one as a high severity myself. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this week's lab. And next week, we're going to actually cover how to prevent this public access, even if it's already in place. But always detect before you prevent, and figure out the business reason behind these buckets, because you do not want to be breaking things. And I'm going to talk about that again soon. Have a great week.